Trước khi bắt đầu, nếu bạn đang tìm kiếm sách để học IELTS hiệu quả, thì đây là những cuốn sách chúng mình khuyên dùng. Bạn hãy xem ở phần giỏ hàng trong kênh nhé.
Section 3.
Hi Francis, Sam. So, how did you go with applying the different theoretical business tools for the report I asked you to write?
It was interesting and made us really focus on which tool was best to use when analysing a business.
Good. So, tell me what you found out.
We liked the theory behind pest analysis. That's political, economic, social and technological, although we're not sure if it was very applicable to our case. Some of the other groups had studies for which it worked really well and they said it was easy to use. But I felt it focused too much on the big picture and was unsuitable for our company.
I agree. On the other hand, I enjoyed using the drill-down method. It was painstaking to do and we seemed to be working on it for ages. But the results were worth waiting for.
Yes, I liked the way it eventually broke down complex problems.
Yes, I much preferred doing the PMI analysis. It was so straightforward to break down into its three components, plus, minus and interesting implications. You just needed to brainstorm these components and then write them up. Fast and effective. And it didn't make your brain hurt doing it.
I agree. And you don't need any special training at all. Anyone can use it.
So, was there any tool that you thought was superior to the others?
In my opinion, the one tool that is critical to business, especially for larger companies, is Pareto analysis. If they applied Pareto analysis, they would see that by focusing on the critical 20% of their problems, they could generate 80% of the benefits. This would allow them to work faster and it also reduces their workload. It's all about finding out what their basic problems are.
I agree with Francis about Pareto, but my favourite was the SWOT analysis. You know, looking at the company's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, as it can be used in so many different situations. It works in large and small companies, and even down to departmental level. It was great for our case study.
Yes, that's true.
OK, I've read your draft report, but can you tell me a bit more about that company you focused on?
Well, the company we used in our study was a manufacturing company who have relied on distributors to take their product to the end user. We did some analysis examining the possibility of them distributing their own products.
We initially looked at their strengths. The company, although it is small, is well known and has a very good reputation. The management are very committed to increasing the company profits, and they are confident this move would be successful.
Right. And the company has quite a lot of staff who have previously worked for distribution companies, so the knowledge is already there. That was something we didn't expect to find and is probably going to help them the most to achieve their goals.
I was quite impressed by some of the opportunities you detailed. I did think you missed something quite pertinent to their future growth, however.
What was that?
You didn't consider the potential for establishing an offshore division. You talked about the company negotiating better terms with its suppliers. Most of these are based abroad, and so if the company had a way of actually distributing the product there, this could be a tremendous opportunity and give them an edge over their competitors.
That's a good point. So, what did you think about the threats we identified?
I thought you did a good job. I was really pleased to see that you considered how the government's planned environmental policy could really affect the viability of this venture. With this law being introduced next year, they might need to find new ways of using their existing technology. It's easy to identify what your competitors are doing, but it's the bigger picture that often gets ignored. So, Sam, what did you learn from this assignment?
Heaps. I guess I hadn't realised how much time it takes to ensure your company survives and profits. It was great to study the different tools in books, but applying them in the real world was much harder than I thought. It was a great learning experience.
I'm glad I could make your assignment relevant. I'm basically happy with your report. You've got the format correct, with the necessary headings, etc., and you've got sufficient details under the different headings. Just remember to state whether or not you think the company should go ahead with the new venture. But you've done a good job so far.
Part 3. You will hear a discussion between a student called Mike and his tutor about Mike's proposed project on oral history.
Thanks, Mike, for dropping by. I've read the proposal for your project, which is an oral history of the local football team, particularly the time around 1983 when they won the league championship. But first, how do you define oral history?
Well, in fact, I used the definition you gave us last year in our research methodology class. I found the handout in my file. The definition says that oral histories are planned interviews or conversations about some aspect of the past which is considered historically or socially important. The interviews are with people who took part in whatever it's about, so there'll be a record which historians can use later for all those academic articles they write.
Mm-hmm.
And although history textbooks are mostly about famous people and important events, oral history can be about ordinary people doing ordinary things. Oral history really seems to have started in the States.
You're right. In fact, the first modern oral history interviews were done by a historian in New York. By that time, audio technology had improved so much that it was fairly easy to record those interviews.
I was also interested in how the internet has contributed to oral history studies.
Yes, it means that lots of people can access the material, and that's great. Also, the interactive nature of the better websites means that more students get interested in oral history.
But from what I've read, the real contribution of the internet is that the recording of the interviews will be preserved forever. In the old days, the tapes would just wear out, and after some years you couldn't really use them, but not now.
You're right, of course. Anyhow, let's move on to the subject of your project. Why did you decide to study a sports team?
Well, actually, I don't even like football very much. And some of my friends think I'm crazy to go for that subject, but my dad is a huge fan and he might be able to help me.
And how did you find out background about the team? You talked to the team manager, I assume?
Yes, I did manage to track him down. And I looked at all the old news stories about the team in the town newspaper office. That was where I got the most helpful information. I had high hopes that the local library would have lots of stuff, but they don't keep many records for more than 10 years.
I know that you managed to locate 10 of the original 18 members of the team using an old-fashioned method, didn't you? Not a website or anything, just the telephone directory.
Yes, I didn't even need to use the local team's records.
OK, now I've read your proposal carefully. Overall, your plans seem excellent, but I want to discuss how you might improve them.
Great.
I've read through the list of questions you've drafted. I felt most of them are rather complex to be processed as oral questions. You don't have too many, which is good, but you should try to do something about that problem.
Right. I'll work on them.
And the time you've allotted for each interview. Actually, I think you may have scheduled too much time for each. You want them to be tight, not going on and on. That makes for better results.
I can change the schedule. One thing I'm nervous about is the recording equipment I use. I've got an old recorder. It runs without making too much noise and it isn't complicated, but it sometimes just doesn't seem to work. It stopped during an interview I tried out with my dad.
Well, the important thing is just be ready if anything happens. Or take some spare batteries, or even an extra recorder. Now, I'm a little concerned with the subjects you've chosen to cover. The topics seem quite general, not very specific. For example, why did they like playing for this team? You need to talk about more exact things and feelings. That way your results will be more valuable.
I'll try to refine them. And, you know, the plan for my report seems to be just to report back more or less what the players say, what happened, when, what they each did and so on. but I'm not sure about that.
Yes. Although your outline seems long enough, change it to indicate that you plan to include your own evaluation of the data you get from your interviewees. Anyhow, best of luck on your project. I look forward to seeing the results.
Thanks for your help and...
Section 3. You will hear two industrial design students called John and Debbie discussing research for a presentation on a new building.
Hi, John.
Hi, Debbie. Should we get ready for our presentation?
Yes. Well, we have to give a presentation to our seminar group about Education House, the new government building that uses cooling, heating and water in an environmentally friendly way.
Let's start with a diagram of the building so the other students can see what it looks like.
Well, here's a very simplified diagram with symbols to represent key areas of the design.
Shall we look at it and see if we can explain the different processes?
Yes. Firstly, on the left-hand side of the roof, there's a cooling tower.
Yes, this is where hot, stale air from inside the building rises naturally up a chimney. There are exhaust fans mounted on the roof that push the air out.
Okay, moving along the top of the roof to the right-hand side, we have the weather station. This monitors how cool the outside air is. Once this is assessed, then the information is fed to computers and these activate the necessary heating or cooling processes.
Okay, let's talk now about the cooling processes.
On the right-hand side of the building below the timber shutters is the part they call the shower tower.
This is where water falls through a 3-storey tube, sucking in air from outside as it falls. The unusual thing about it is this fresh air actually helps to cool the building.
Yes, it's amazing, really. Okay, below ground level in the basement on the right-hand side is a tank, which forms another part of the cooling process. The tank is full of small metal balls. Water passes through this tank. Each time it does this, the balls absorb the heat from the water, making it cooler without using any energy.
What shall we talk about next?
Well, you see the balcony below the light shelf?
What happens there?
Rainwater is fed down from the roof, and this is where it's used to water the plants that cover the outside wall.
What about the square above the light shelf? It represents a window, doesn't it?
Yes, that's important to point out, because the upper floor windows get more daylight than the lower floor ones. The windows at the top of the building are smaller than those at the bottom. This means energy is saved higher up in the building because not as much heat is wasted through large windows.
Let's continue the presentation by giving our opinions on some of the features of the building. Let's talk about what we thought was surprising about the building.
Yes, it's not out of the ordinary in terms of size. I mean, it's well under the height of the surrounding buildings. Also, in the past, I think people would have been surprised by the vegetation on the facades, but that's become quite common now.
That's right, but we both agreed that the access to the building through a shopping arcade is quite unusual.
Yes, the way in is behind a small cafe, which is not what you'd expect. Now, should we mention the findings on staff productivity in the building? According to one article, the access to greenery and vegetation is increasing productivity by relieving stress.
Yes, I remember that article.
Researchers have been monitoring this for a couple of years now, so the results are clear. But to be honest, I think it's pretty obvious that you feel calmer seeing greenery around you.
Yes, we've been reading that in newspapers for ages, haven't we? So I wouldn't bother to mention it.
Okay. So, we haven't mentioned the edge space yet. You know, the place that's been marked for social interaction between workers, where you can have a coffee and a chat. What are your thoughts about it?
Well, I'm just amazed the management allowed it. I'm sure all the staff love to get away from their desks, I would. I'm just not sure how much work I'd get done if I had an edge space to go to.
I agree. Okay, let's think about the water system now. They want to supply 100% of their own non-drinking water needs by recycling water, and it looks like they are on target to complete this stage of the project by early next year. But you know, I don't think the staff are going to respond well to this.
I agree. People just don't like using too much recycled water, even though it's been proven to pose no health risks whatsoever.
Well, I've really enjoyed researching this building.
Part 3. You will hear a business studies student called Edward talking to his tutor about some research he is doing on product development.
Hello, Edward. Sit down.
Thanks. I need some advice on my presentation about product development.
Right. Have you decided what to focus on?
Yes, the product I've chosen is a particular type of mosquito net.
Any reason for choosing that?
I spent last summer travelling round Africa with a friend. He's studying medicine, so when we were in a region where mosquitoes cause malaria, we visited a medical centre. I chatted to an administrator while my friend talked to one of the doctors, and I found out they've had far fewer cases of malaria since these mosquito nets became available locally. That made me interested in them.
OK. Mosquito nets have quite a long history, don't they? I believe they've been used in Japan for centuries.
That's right. Though apparently Queen Cleopatra slept under one in ancient Egypt. That was probably where they were invented.
Right.
And much later, nets were used in China, so perhaps they were invented there independently. Originally, they were made of silk, but later cotton was used, and nowadays they're mainly synthetic. It wasn't until the middle of the 20th century that they developed nets treated with insecticides for use by the military, and that was a major step forward. They used an insecticide called DDT, but it was later found that this could be harmful to people as well as mosquitoes.
Is that still a problem with modern nets?
Oh, no. The chemicals used nowadays are safe, even if people sleep under them every night. And the nets work, and they're odour-free. But they have to be treated fairly often with the chemical, which the owners need to do themselves.
Presumably distribution of the chemical can be a problem in remote areas? I mean, people may not be able to get hold of it easily.
That's right.
OK, tell me about this net you're going to talk about.
Well, the brand name is Olicet, and the product was invented by a Japanese company. These nets are an improvement on the alternatives because the insecticide is contained inside the fibre and released gradually. It's not coated on the outside as with ordinary nets.
So the chemicals don't have to be replaced?
Right, and Olicet nets are also tougher and don't tear as easily. They give protection for at least 5 years, compared with a year or two for other nets.
Well, it sounds interesting. But for your seminar presentation, will you provide the bigger picture as well?
Yes, it'll be a case study of product development. I thought I'd introduce my presentation by describing the background to the new product, the general context.
You mean the business context? Where the investment's coming from and that sort of thing?
Well, I was thinking I'd talk first about insect-borne diseases, particularly malaria, and why there's such an urgent need for new ways of fighting it. Some people might not know much about it.
Yes, that's a good idea.
I've got some statistics about the numbers of people worldwide who get the disease each year. I thought I'd show those. They're quite staggering.
I can imagine. It's one of the world's biggest health problems, after all. It'd also be useful if you could find some statistical information on how malaria affects countries' economic output and present that too.
OK, I'm sure I can find something. After that, I'll talk about mosquito nets. First, the historical development, just briefly, and then I'll introduce the Olicet mosquito net.
Yes, keep it simple. You could just present a bulleted list of its characteristics, the things that make it different from other types of net, and talk that through.
Right. Then I thought I'd outline the production process.
Fine.
Should I give some information about where the money for the project has come from? There are lots of government and private sponsors.
Definitely. That's a very important aspect of any product development. Where are the nets being manufactured, by the way?
Oh, over half are made in Tanzania by a company called A to Z. They got an interest-free loan to buy in the necessary machinery.
Well, I'd say a bit about the company profile as well, and then present figures about numbers of staff and the kinds of people they're employing on the Olicet project, if you can find the details.
OK. I haven't included any information about marketing. I've got a lot of notes about it, but I'm not sure how to present them.
I wouldn't mention that if I were you. You've only got a short time for your presentation and you've got quite a lot of material here already. But you should provide some figures about output. Have you found out from the company's website how many nets they actually produce?
Yes, it's over 30 million a year.
Right.
Then I'm not sure how to finish off. What do you think about including something on potential investment?
Section 3. You will hear a student called Joel talking to his tutor about his research into farmers' attitudes towards new developments in agriculture.
Dr. Owen?
Come in, Joel. Right, so how's your research going? You're looking at how farmers feel about new technology in agriculture, aren't you?
Well, actually, it's more general than that. I'm looking at their attitudes to a variety of new developments in agriculture.
OK. Have you got a title for the project yet?
I was thinking of something simple, like farmers' attitudes towards the adoption of new farming practices.
That's possibly a bit too general. I think the title needs to be a bit more specific. What kind of farming will you be looking at?
Well, that'll vary, actually. But I want to speak to each of the 10 farmers in my sample. So I've chosen farms which are all in the same region.
OK. Well, I'd specify where they are then.
Right. I'll amend the title to do that.
OK. Is there any particular reason why you've decided to do face-to-face interviews? It'll be quite time-consuming, won't it?
Yes, and I did consider doing telephone interviews for that reason, especially as it's unnecessary for me to actually see the places where they work. It's just that, in my experience, a lot of farmers don't like talking on the phone, so they'll be more likely to talk freely if I see them in person.
Yes, you're probably right. Good.
Then the first thing I want to investigate is how the farmers actually find out about new developments in agriculture that they might want to adopt. What sources they use.
Right. So how are you going to do this?
Well, I could make a checklist of sources of information for them to look at in advance, so they could tick off the ones they actually use. Things like farming magazines, farm product advertisements, television and the internet and so on.
It might be more useful to ask them rather than show them a list. A spontaneous response to one or two open questions might give you a more accurate picture.
All right, I'll do that then.
Now, talk me through some of the other issues you want to cover.
Well, there's the way the government communicates with farmers.
Right, well, one thing is, farmers complain that the government sends out the same information to all of them, whether they're poultry farmers or dairy farmers or arable farmers.
So they get all this information, but half of it doesn't actually apply to them.
Exactly. So you could look at that.
Right. Then I wanted to look at attitudes of British farmers to the cost of making any changes on their farms. According to articles I've read, farmers in Britain aren't, in principle, against investing money in new machinery and new practices, but they're actually just too busy to work out what the financial implications are.
Yes, and a lot of them don't seem to consider getting financial advice from their accountants about it either.
Right.
There's also been some research in Australia on sheep rearing practices. I can give you the reference if you like. Basically, it appears that the majority of Australian sheep farmers are willing to risk adopting new practices on the basis of just a few pieces of research. They don't usually wait until the evidence in favour of the changes is overwhelming. They're quite happy to act before then so they can get ahead of the game.
OK. I'll take a look at that. Thanks. We said we'd also look at some of the reading material I've been reviewing.
Yes, I had another look at Contemporary Farming Manual, which is clearly bang up to date. It covers a lot of things a farmer might want to know, but it's so dull.
Absolutely. I found it really hard going. And I can't imagine any farmer wading through it. There aren't even any decent pictures.
Did you have time to look at Running a Small Farm?
Yes, although I only read bits of it because, despite being entertaining, it wasn't very academic.
I know. And a lot of the information is either misleading or simply wrong. I'm surprised it got published at all. I don't imagine the farming press will rate it very highly.
You recommend agriculture and economics. I expected that it would be really difficult. The title's a bit off-putting. But I thought it was brilliant. So I've bought it.
Yes. Some people think it relies too heavily on farming practices in specific parts of the world. But the theories that underpin these are universal. And that's why it's a required textbook for anyone studying agriculture.
Right.
What else did you come across?
I borrowed How to Survive in Farming from the library. I thought it'd be interesting background, and I liked the informal style. But it turned out to have been written years ago.
Yes, and like everything else, farming fashions have changed, so it's badly in need of a new edition.
Can I ask you a question about...